I knew something was off the second she smiled. Not a kind smile, not even smug. It was the type of smile someone gives you when they've already told the punchline, just waiting for you to realize you're the joke. She folded her hands, leaned back in the fake leather HR chair, and said with this deadpan chirp, "We're realigning the team, Rachel. It's not personal." Right. Just a spontaneous Tuesday realignment, 2 weeks before our Series B closes, and apparently the only person worth realigning is the woman who's spent 4 years stitching this company together, one MOU at a time. I glanced over at Karen. Yes, Karen, like a parody, and she slid a branded swag bag across the table, like she was handing me a goddamn party favor. Inside, a heather gray company hoodie, a mug that said, "Coffee is for closers," and a $50 DoorDash gift card. What was missing? Oh, just the $95,000 deferred bonus I was promised in writing after landing our Easton Jenkins Channel deal. I flipped through the termination packet like I was flipping coupons in a dentist's waiting room, calm as hell on the surface. But my brain was already sorting files, mentally opening contracts like drawers. Drawer A, person contingent clauses. Drawer B, partner renewal MOUs with key personnel triggers. Drawer C, governance covenants tied to executive continuity. I caught it immediately, the omission. My bonus wasn't there, not a line, not a whisper, just vanished into a fog of budget refresh initiatives. I tapped the corner of the packet, looked Karen square in the eye, and asked, "And the bonus?" She blinked. "Oh, that's been absorbed into departmental marketing. Legal approved it." She smiled wider. "But you do get to keep the hoodie." If you're still listening, hey, quick thing, 97% of people never subscribe or like the channel, and this story gets deep. It really motivates the team when you do both, so if you're here for the whole ride, hit that sub. Thanks. All right. Now, back to the betrayal. I didn't say a word. I just nodded slowly, signed where they told me, handed back the pen, and stood up. But not before I slipped the original MSA, the Master Services Agreement I had tucked in my briefcase, back into its sleeve. That MSA? It had a clause. One they forgot. One tied not to the company, but to me. And Karen? Karen just sat there, still smiling, still clueless, thinking she'd won, thinking she could steal my blood-earned bonus, fire me with a hoodie, and walk into a Series B raise like she hadn't just yanked the keystone from the arch. But the thing about keystones is, pull one wrong, and the whole structure comes down. Quietly, slowly, and then all at once. Back home, I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I didn't even drink, though Lord knows I thought about it. I changed into sweats, fed the dog, microwaved leftover lasagna, and sat down at my kitchen table with a folder the size of a small tombstone. Printed contracts. Real ones. Not the digital fluff you sign with one of those cartoon signature pads. The originals. With ink that bled from actual pens, and clauses that bled from actual battles. Page after page, I scanned with the precision of a mortician doing post-mortem on her own career. And there it was, right there in the MOU with NovaCore Solutions, our biggest West Coast integration partner. Line 14B, subsection 3. In the event of the removal of Rachel D. Pierce from the company without cause, and without a formal transition period of not less than 60 business days, this memorandum of understanding shall be considered null and void. A $12 million pipeline, 8 high-value clients stacked behind one domino. And that domino? me. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't hitch. I just reached for my burner phone, not the dramatic kind, just an old iPhone I never got around to recycling, and called the contact I'd never used but always kept. Evelyn Langford, General Counsel, Iron Shore Capital, lead investor in our Series A. She was the one who grilled me for 45 minutes about channel conflict risk before signing off. She picked up after 2 rings. Rachel? Evelyn, I wanted to flag something, quietly, off record. A pause, then, I'm listening. I believe a material covenant may have been compromised. My termination was abrupt, and there are partner contracts tied to my position that may be void now. Another pause, heavier this time. Which contracts? Novacor, for starters. Continuity clause. No transition period. It's in the original MOU. I have it. Silence. Then she exhaled sharply. Email me a redacted copy. Use Proton. Subject line, Canary. I didn't ask questions, didn't explain. I just hung up, opened Proton Mail, and sent the file. Redacted just enough to keep plausible deniability, but clear enough to light a fire. I sat back and stared at the ceiling, remembering how Karen used to brag about how investors never actually read the footnotes. Thing is, Evelyn Langford does. And this wasn't about getting my job back. This wasn't even about the bonus anymore. This was about showing them what happens when you rip out the quiet architect and expect the building to keep standing. They forgot the clause. But the clause hadn't forgotten me. 3 days after the hoodie, the quiet freeze began. It started with Bencor. Normally, they're on our weekly check-in like clockwork. Tuesday, 9 a.m., Bruce with his dumb coffee jokes, and Janet asking about API revisions she already has answers to. But this week, nothing. No ping, no reschedule, just silence. I didn't even need to text anyone. I already knew. They were stalling. By Wednesday, 2 more partners, TriQuant and Valor Tech, postponed upcoming co-branded webinars. Not canceled, just postponed. No reason given, just vague little shoulder shrug emails that said everything without saying a word. Karen, of course, had no clue. She thought it was market turbulence. She blamed sales in the Thursday stand-up, said maybe we needed to revitalize outreach with Gen Z forward energy. I nearly choked on my coffee when someone quoted that back to me. Internally, they were scrambling. Externally, the investors started sniffing. When 6 of your 7 enterprise tier accounts go mute after a key staff departure, people notice. Evelyn noticed. A quiet silence in VC land is louder than a press release. Meanwhile, I didn't post anything online. No big announcement. No on to new adventures. Post with a stock photo of a mountain range. I went dark, but not idle. On Friday morning, I sat in a small shared office above a dry cleaner off Harding Avenue, signed the articles of organization for a new holding company, Pierce Ledger, LLC, and watched the ink dry like it was sealing a contract with the devil. Only the devil wasn't me. The devil was the clause I'd buried 3 years ago under Karen's father's signature, when he still understood the value of quiet insurance policies. By noon, I'd filed for a DUNS number, opened a business checking account, and drafted transfer notices for the intellectual property and service MOUs I'd personally authored over the years. The IP wasn't company-owned. That was the trick. It was dual-use IP, licensed per contract to my previous employer, but authored, held, and now transferred fully to Pierce Ledger. The contracts themselves had person-specific terms. I was the named liaison, the glue. Without me, they'd been rendered inert. What I was doing wasn't sabotage. It was succession. Just not the kind they'd anticipated. And to be clear, I didn't want revenge. Not the dramatic kind, anyway. I didn't want to see Karen cry or watch her get fired. I wasn't trying to torch the place. But I'd spent 4 years weaving a quilt they thought they could rip apart and re-stitch with Canva graphics and LinkedIn buzzwords. So no, I wasn't seeking revenge. I was simply taking back what was mine and making sure when the investors asked, where did everything go? The only answer left was my name. The $95K didn't stay buried for long. It never does, really. Not when it's laundered through a spreadsheet by someone who still thinks pivot is a personality trait. Apparently, a junior finance analyst, bright kid named Oliver, fresh out of Michigan State, had been combing through Q2 budget adjustments for a completely unrelated expense alignment. Poor guy was probably trying to impress someone by color-coding pivot tables, God bless him. What he found instead was a line item labeled Q2 Influencer Outreach plus Branding Collateral Refresh, approved by Karen 3 days after I was let go. $95,000 even, no breakdown, no receipts, no vendors. Just a lump sum reallocation from Strategic Partnerships Deferred Comp Fund. Oliver wasn't an idiot. He flagged it to his team lead in FP&A, who flagged it to internal audit, who flagged it to legal, and suddenly, what was once a ghosted bonus became a small electrical fire behind the drywall. Quiet at first, then smoldering. Karen, I later heard, tried to dismiss it as a temporary budget rebalance. But legal wasn't buying it. Neither was HR, especially when they realized there was no formal documentation justifying my removal. Team realignment doesn't hold up well when it's followed by a 6-figure bonus being funneled into a budget refresh for swag bags and Instagram ad buys, especially when your Instagram account hasn't posted in 5 weeks and your swag bag includes mugs from 2022 inventory. Around the same time, I met with Celia Tran, principal at Rose Point Ventures, one of our second-tier Series A backers. Unlike Ironshore, they weren't lead stakeholders, but they were smart money, quiet money. Celia had always struck me as the kind of person who didn't bother with poker faces because she already owned the table. We met at a neutral cafe in the city, nothing fancy. I brought her a red folder. Inside, a printed copy of the NovaCore continuity clause, the date of my termination, and a single-page analysis I'd written showing projected client churn assuming clause-based invalidation. Estimated loss, 12 $12 in contracted revenue. She didn't interrupt once. Just read, sipped her espresso, and then tapped the folder twice before sliding it back. "Does Karen know you still have this?" she asked. No, and she didn't read it when she signed it either. She smirked. That's becoming a pattern. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I just said, all I'm doing is ensuring the board knows what they actually own. She stood up, shook my hand, and said, "Good, because we're getting tired of finding out what they don't." By the time I walked back to my car, I already had a text from Evelyn at Ironshore. "We've received whistleblower documentation R bonus theft, reviewing impact against governance obligations." I didn't reply. I didn't have to. It was moving now, without me having to push. That's the thing about trapdoors. They look like floorboards until you step on them. And Karen? She'd stepped with both feet. The email went out at 6:14 a.m., sharp. Subject line: Series B prep call, confirmed participants. And someone on the thread had clearly tried to sound calm, maybe even optimistic, but the gap was glaring. One name was missing. Penbridge Equity Partners. Our second largest institutional investor? Just gone. No replacement? No forward? No apology? Just a polite absence where a $9 million commitment used to be. I read the email twice, then once more for the punctuation. The tone was too cheerful, manufactured. That's when you know the water's boiling. Inside the company, Karen was spiraling but pretending to float. She blamed volatile market conditions during the prep call, whatever that means, then pivoted to an unhinged monologue about leaning into adaptive momentum and harnessing uncertainty as a growth vector. I'd heard her use that last one before. She thinks it makes her sound like an exec. It just makes her sound like ChatGPT on a cocaine drip. The CFO, Matt, wasn't playing along. I've seen that man keep a straight face through SEC audits, but now his collar was damp. Not metaphorically, literally. He kept wiping it with a napkin like he was auditioning to be a magician and forgot the rabbit. The drop-off had started, and I wasn't even in the room. That was the part they didn't understand. They thought removing me was like deleting a line of code, press backspace, move on. But I wasn't code. I was the compiler. The partnerships I built didn't just carry revenue, they carried belief. And belief doesn't transfer well when it's fired in a side room with a hoodie and a gift card. I got the text that afternoon from someone I trusted on the inside, someone who knew how to keep their head down while paying attention. Investors are cross-referencing your termination file with Series A governance docs. Ironshore Legal is pulling original covenants. Penbridge dropout not random. That was the moment I knew the walls were shifting. Not crashing, yet, but swelling with pressure. Every document I'd ever written, every clause I'd baked into the base of those agreements, every conditional termination clause and continuity rider, they were now fossils being unearthed by people with flashlights and gloves. Karen, of course, had no idea. She was too busy forcing the comms team to mock up new branding decks for the Series B pitch. Bright colors. Words like resilience and agility splattered over models who looked like they'd never had a job. But from the outside, my absence was starting to echo. Client calls were still stalled. Renewal paperwork sat unsigned. The people I used to text at midnight before a big integration rollout, they weren't texting anyone now. Not sales, not support, just no one. Like they were waiting to see which way the wind would blow. I didn't chase them. I didn't call. I didn't post some vague LinkedIn update with a picture of a coffee cup and a "more soon" caption. I let the storm build. Let them notice the quiet. Let them start asking who was really holding the net under all this illusion of momentum. And when they asked, they'd already know. They hit the wall on a Wednesday. It was during the third round of diligence, right as the Series B term sheet was supposed to move into final red lines. Everyone had their suits pressed and their teeth polished, expecting nothing more than a few boilerplate comments and a ceremonial signature sprint. But then a notification hit Legal's shared inbox. Renewal on hold, pending verification of continuity clause, from Darien Group. Darien wasn't just any partner. They were the anchor of our enterprise delivery stack, responsible for 27% of integration volume, and the cornerstone proof point in our investor materials. Without Darian's renewal, the entire narrative fell apart. And in that email, clear as oxygen: renewal contingent on confirmation of original liaison, Rachel D. Pierce. No Pierce, no paper. Inside legal, I imagine someone dropped their coffee. They always do when a clause starts breathing. Within an hour, the internal Slack was melting. People were tripping over acronyms they'd never read, spinning up emergency Zooms with titles like Urgent, Partnership Risk Review, and Contingency Protocol, Do Not Forward. It took them less than 3 hours to realize it wasn't just Darian. It was 6 agreements, 6 legacy contracts with embedded key person dependency clauses, some going back to our earliest deals. They were old, they were quiet, and they were alive. And not one of them had been reviewed post-termination. Why would they be? According to Karen, I was just an ops side formality. By Thursday afternoon, Evelyn Langford's assistant requested a formal copy of my exit documents. No noise, no pressure, just a cold little paper trail request from the same people who'd written half the Series A governance protections. Smart investors don't shout, they observe. Karen, from what I heard, tried to spin it, said the clauses were legacy artifacts, and that legal would provide risk-adjusted workarounds. But legal doesn't work around contract law when $40 million is on the table, and the founder's daughter just got caught stealing a 6-figure bonus while triggering a continuity breach. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my new office, if you could call a windowless leased space above a Thai restaurant an office, watching all of it unfold through quiet channels. A former colleague sent me a screenshot of the flagged clauses, highlighted in blood red with a note at the bottom. Key person, Rachel D. Pierce. Termination without cause, invalidates contract. Underneath it, in yellow, no transition period documented? My phone didn't ring. No one reached out. But I wasn't waiting for apologies. I was letting gravity do the work. I didn't have to weaponize anything. I'd just written the contracts the right way, when no one else was thinking long term. I'd built tripwires into the very infrastructure they were now stumbling through like toddlers in a minefield. The term sheet stalled. The room got cold. And somewhere inside Iron Shore's boardroom, I imagined Evelyn looking up from my file and calmly saying, "She fired the one person we can't replace." Let them dig. The deeper they go, the louder it gets. It finally tipped when the lead backer ran the numbers himself. No assistants. No legal team. Just Warren Halbridge, founding partner of Iron Shore Capital, sitting alone in a high-rise corner office in Boston, cross-referencing termination dates, bonus reallocations, and the governance deck he signed 3 years ago. Warren doesn't do drama, he does math, and the math didn't lie. Karen had breached at least 3 funding covenants, one through wrongful termination, one through the unauthorized budget transfer, and one, most damning of all, through failure to disclose active dependency clauses that materially impacted investor valuation narratives. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten. He just picked up the phone and scheduled a founders-only side meeting before the final Series B vote. Only 2 people were present, Warren and Karen's father, our CEO, Andrew. The man who used to quote Drucker like scripture and once told me, "If you do your job right, no one should notice until you're not there." Well, I wasn't there. And now they noticed. What I heard, secondhand, but reliable, was this. Warren slid a printout of the flagged clauses across the table, all annotated. Then he slid a second sheet, a list of investors already aware of the breaches. He waited a beat, then said, without raising his voice, "She either resigns or we pull the round. You have until tomorrow." Karen didn't know it yet. Not fully. She was still sitting in a conference room downstairs, holding pre-meeting pep talks with the design team about updated pitch fonts. But upstairs, her oxygen was being cut off in real time. I knew something had shifted when I received the email. No greeting, no explanation, just a PDF titled Contingency Transfer Terms, sent anonymously, CC'd to my Proton mail. Legal boilerplate formatted in the exact style Ironshore uses for pre-acquisition maneuvering. The language was surgical, cold. Transfer of operational governance subject to contingency clauses triggered by executive misconduct, contractual violation or misappropriation of funds, effective upon board consensus or equity threshold breach. They didn't say my name. They didn't need to. Because what was happening now wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to the bylaws, the clauses, the agreements I'd helped write when no one was looking. The scaffolding I'd built without applause, the paper bones of the company now rejecting its infected organ, and I still hadn't spoken publicly. No posts, no leaks, not a single "told you so." Because revenge isn't a feeling, it's a structure, and hers was collapsing under its own stolen weight. The Series B board meeting began like every other performative ritual in startup land. Croissants no one eats, coffee everyone pretends isn't awful, and a stack of slick pitch decks that look like they were designed by someone who thinks gradients equal growth. Karen strutted in 5 minutes late, wearing a beige power suit 2 sizes too confident, clutching a folder filled with nothing but buzzwords and misplaced self-assurance. She started talking before her chair even hit the floor, something about positioning ourselves as an AI-adjacent enabler of hybrid scalability. I watched from the far side of the room, seated 2 rows back, just close enough to feel the temperature shift. Warren didn't look up as she spoke. He just opened a manila folder and pulled out my termination file, paper-clipped, stamped, tabbed. He let her finish, completely. No interruptions. That's how you know someone's done playing chess and already flipping the board. Then, calmly, clearly, he slid the file to the center of the table and said, "Congratulations, you just handed away your company." Silence. Not confusion, not shock, just silence. The kind that only shows up when everyone in the room knows exactly what the hell is about to happen. But no one wants to be the first to move. Andrew, the CEO, the father, the man who once told me, "There are no small missteps, only ignored ones," looked at his daughter like he was seeing her through the glass of a police lineup. His mouth didn't open. His hands didn't move. He just stared. Karen blinked, once, then said, "I wasn't made aware of any structural conflict with the continuity clauses. We had legal review." She didn't finish the sentence. Because halfway through it, company counsel, Julia Klein, a woman who keeps her hair in a bun tighter than most NDAs, opened her own folder and said, with a voice sharp enough to fillet a salmon, "Actually, Karen, you initialed the removal paperwork and the budget reallocation. Both. I have the timestamps." Karen's mouth opened again, but nothing came out this time. Just an empty breath, like a wind-up doll running out of song. Someone coughed. No one laughed, not even a smirk. Warren turned to Andrew. "Governance violations? Continuity breaches? Misappropriated comp? We move to board consensus or initiate contingency transfer via Iron Shore's voting block. Your call. I didn't flinch, didn't gloat. I just watched. Karen glanced at me then, finally, like maybe I'd offer her a rope. But I wasn't the storm. I was the architect of the weather pattern, and her forecast had always been printed in ink. I didn't say a word, just sat there. The wreckage wasn't mine to cause anymore. It was theirs to realize. 1 week later, the building was still there, but the company inside it was not. At 8:43 a.m. on a fogged-out Thursday, a holding entity called Aegis Intermodal Holdings finalized a quiet but lethal acquisition. 51% controlling interest in what had once been my home, my burden, my architecture. No champagne, no press release. Just a notarized cascade of equity transfers executed with surgical precision. Iron Shore had built the machine. I'd just handed them the map. Karen was out before lunch. Andrew, her father, our former CEO, resigned under the ever-useful phrase, in the interest of long-term clarity. The kind of clarity you only get after watching a room implode in silence while your daughter tries to explain away forged budget reallocations and continuity clause breaches like they were typos in a Slack message. As for me, I didn't return as COO. That role was already dust. Titles mean nothing when you've already built the structure beneath them. They offered something else. Strategic governance advisor to the newly installed executive board. Not flashy, not loud, just permanent. My office was smaller now, no view, but it came with something no corner suite ever did. Control without chaos, clarity without noise. I didn't even have to show up every day. The work was in the infrastructure now, the clauses, the compliance trails, the very bylaws Karen skimmed through with a smirk while hiding a 6-figure bonus in a marketing refresh spreadsheet. I stopped by the office that Friday. No announcement. Just a quiet walk through the building. People avoided eye contact. Not from shame, more like reverence laced with discomfort. The way you look at someone who witnessed something and didn't blink. I left one thing behind, the hoodie. Same one Karen gave me during my firing, still gray, still cheap. But this time, it had a patch sewn onto the back in clean black stitching, Founder Emeritus. No note, no drama, just folded neatly, placed on her old desk, the tag still tucked under the collar like a body under a sheet. On my way out, I passed the mural she'd commissioned during the rebranding fiasco, scaling together in neon orange letters over a timeline that ended poetically at 2023. I didn't stop walking. They gave me a gift card. I gave them a reorganization.